good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this YorRobots seminar, the latest one in the series. My name's Andy Tyrrell from the Department of Electronic Engineering here at York, but you don't really care about that because you've not come to listen to me today. You've come to listen to Professor Gus Eiben from the Vrije University in Amsterdam, but also, as it says on his slide there, he's also a visiting professor in the Department of Electronic Engineering here at the University of York, or wherever you may be. Gus is, I would say, one of the pioneers in computational intelligence in particular, and evolutionary robotics over the last few years. Gus runs the computational intelligence group in Amsterdam, and has produced many seminal papers in evolutionary computing. He's sharing his screen now, so I'm not sure whether you can see it very well, but I would recommend this if you haven't seen it, if you haven't got it. Introduction to Evolutionary Computing by some guy called Eiben and Smith. It's an excellent book if you want to learn about evolutionary computing. Gus,
I just wanted to make sure that everybody can see what you are showing.
So it's there, and Gus, you can pay me the money later, all right? So that's good. So I think without further ado, let me just pass across to Gus to give his talk. About 35 minutes, Gus, or so.
Okay, yes. Thank you very much for the invitation. As I said, I love to talk about this, and this is a great opportunity, especially because the audience is so knowledgeable, and Andy is among them. So, wait a second. Okay.
Can't actually hear that, Gus. Are we meant to be hearing it or not?
Andy, were you saying that there was no sound to this?
Yeah, there was no sound to it, yeah.
Oh, strange. Okay, sorry. I did hear it in my headphones. Apologies. So this was the Dutch news item on TV, big news, primetime television. And after that, next day, I got the questions, is it really something? Is it just a media stunt, or is there some deep scientific vision behind it? And the answer is yes, there is a vision. Given the fact that evolution can create intelligence, we can assume that artificial evolution can create artificial intelligence. So the question is, can we really do that? And if you look into intelligence, it's easy to notice that there are two sorts: the digital one, which was prominent in the 20th century, and the new emerging one, embodied intelligence, in the 21st century. To put it very simply, to have intelligence, we need a body and a brain. We need the hardware and the software. And that means also that there are two views on intelligence. There is this fundamental equation or implication: the environment and the body and the brain imply some behavior. And we can focus on the brain only, or rather focus on the body and the brain to make intelligent behavior happening. Example, if you want to build a system that can play football, then you have to design optimal bodies for doing that and optimal brains that drive that bodies. And you can have a lot of options. You could be an anthropochauvinist, building robots that look like Messi. You could be a pragmatist, saying, you can play football with 4 feet better than with 2 feet. Or you could be a radicalist, saying, you don't even need feet for football. You can drive on wheels and still, win the game. So, but this shows how hard the problem is, because the design space is huge. And when you look around, like, what or who could solve this kind of design problems, the best way we know of, the answer is evolution, because it could produce all different life forms for all different niches and circumstances on Earth. So a very logical idea is to go and try to make artificial evolution, embodied evolution, and that is evolving robots. So for this, we need an artificial version of natural evolution, which is out there. I will quickly go through it because you probably know it. You only need 3 things: the definition of an individual, which in this case, the technical problem is solving the traveling salesman problem, and each tour is a possible individual in the space of all tours. Then you need a selection mechanism, which will select individuals by their quality. And here we can use length. Short is good, long is bad. And once you have that, you can select would-be parent, and then you need a digital equivalent of sex or reproduction, which could look like this in this particular problem. You could have two tours, and you can recombine them, and you get a third one, which is the child. And in this case, both tours are suboptimal because they are unnecessarily long. They have a bad part, and this poor child inherits both bad parts. So in common parlance, if one of the parents was beautiful and the other is intelligent, then this child is just ugly and stupid. But this is not a big problem because we have selection to remove that. And putting it all together, we get the good old evolutionary loop. Look at this, it's very simple, but it will come back, it's important. So repeated cycles of selection, reproduction, and evaluation in between. Putting this all together, you get what we call evolutionary computing. And there are a lot of books about it, so let me recommend just a good one to you, following Andy. The main message from this book is that there is no such thing as the evolutionary algorithm. There are a lot of different dialogues, if you will, genetic algorithms, evolution strategies, evolutionary programming, genetic programming, whatnot, applicable for optimization, modeling, and most importantly, design. So evolutionary design can give us optimal designs for inanimate things, objects that don't do anything, that they are just there and they can have an optimal shape, material, or arrangement. And evolution has proved to be able to solve these kind of problems very well. But this is not the most challenging case, actually. And to understand why this can be more interesting is let's distinguish passive and active artifacts. Okay, so an active artifact would be something that has agency and autonomy, that can observe its environment, respond to that environment, and do something. So this is what we could call robots, or in a simulated environment, virtual creatures. So this is a beautiful paper that shows that a problem, which is really hard for classic approaches, can be solved by evolution. And the problem is, given some body, almost random body, come up with a brain that can drive that body such that it walks in a straight line without falling. And this is a hard problem because there are many degrees of freedom, complex interactions between the components, and there are no theoretical models. So this is when evolution is your friend. And here you see that indeed, in about 1,000 generations, you can evolve a brain that moves this creature in an optimal or almost optimal way. So that's good news, but it's still only simulation. And I'm talking about stuff, objects that are active. And this leads to the evolutionary robotics area, which also has a seminal book from Stefano Nolfi and Dario Floriano, published in 2000, older than you may think, perhaps. So evolutionary robotics can be simply defined as it is the field that aims to apply evolutionary computation to evolve the overall design or the controllers, or both for real and simulated robots. And if you look into the literature, what is being done in this area, then almost all, 90% of the work is done in simulation. So you have a simulator and you have an evolutionary process, and the only link between the two is the evaluation. So when the evolutionary algorithm generates a new robot or a new brain for a given robot, then it is passed to the simulator. It simulates its behavior and gives back some fitness value so that the evolutionary process can continue. But this is subject to something which we really hate, and that is the reality gap, which is the well-known effect of if you evolve something in simulation, it will be a good solution only in simulation. Matter really matters. So as we know, if you move or transport an evolved robot solution to the physical world, its behavior will be different and typically worse. So this means that actually we should look at another axis, not only the axis between passive and active, but there is another between virtual and real. And the sweet spot is to evolve active, real entities. That is the robot evolution again. So there were things and thoughts and papers touching upon this from different perspectives, but one of perhaps what Andy called a seminal paper is from 2012, which outlined the future of artificial evolutionary systems in the 21st century, postulating that it will be embodied, and observed a deep relationship between evolution as we know it, and that's the circle on the left-hand side, starting with a propagule or zygote, contrasted to a blueprint or body or plan for some artifact, and the following a cycle which has basically the same components. And this paper outlined the grand challenges to this. And even though we are already years further and we know much more about this line of research, these are still very important. And the challenges were you have to identify what kind of stuff you want to evolve, what kind of bodies you want, how to reproduce them, how to create a mutant or how to create a child of two of these guys, robots. So that means how to start your evolution, how to stop your evolution if you want to keep it from running away. And then because it is practical, we don't have millions of years, so the evolvability and the speed of evolution is an issue. And obviously process control. So it's an algorithm we have to control. We have to make sure that the components are well aligned and that everything works. And finally, a very specific subject mentioned already in 2012. Now it's becoming more and more prominent. It is the co-optimization or co-evolution of body and brain, in particular using learning for it. And if you put this all together, you get a big picture. This is a very big picture, overarching 2 centuries, about the notion of evolution. And in the 19th century, the notion of evolution came from biology. It was an explanatory concept that told us about a process that has taken place already, or we are in the middle of it, in wetware, evolution, as the clarification of how life emerged. In the 20th century, this was moved into the realm of software, so wetware to software, from in vivo to in silico, and that is the area we know as evolutionary computing. And in the 21st century, people like Andy and Ellen Winfield and Emma Hart and myself are working on the next transition that is moving from software to hardware, from in silico to in material, and this is what we call the evolution of things. So this is the moment where you may think it is all our idea. No, it is not. So to be correct and giving you a historical perspective, there were very important milestones along the way. I will give you a few very briefly. Perhaps the most interesting one, the most prominent one, is from 2000. Howard Lipson and Jordan Pollack were simulating robots, and interestingly, they fabricated the result, the best robot the simulator came up with in a physical world, and thereby they somehow they crossed the border between simulated and real. But evolution was offline, evolution was not real, and these robots were not really robots because they did not have sensors. The notion of embodied evolution is unfortunately taken by Richard Watson and his colleagues, who used it for evolving only the brains in a population of robots that have fixed bodies. That was a very nice piece of work, but you could say that evolution was purely digital because it was all about the software driving the robots and not about the hardware part. Also a beautiful title about self-reproducing machines, again involving Howard Lipson in 2005, is far away from evolution because, yes, indeed, it shows that machines, physical objects can reproduce, but that reproduction means the creation of an identical clone, which means that it is evolutionarily not interesting. We don't have variation and therefore no selection. And my recommendation for today, if you only want to read one book, then I would say this is a lovely book. It's a pop science book, but it's also enjoyable for professionals, from a biologist who used robot models to learn something about the evolution of vertebrae. The only problem that he noticed, it will take very, very long. So they could do in months only a couple of generations of very small populations. Then coming closer to what we are doing, the RoboGen system in Switzerland was meant for educational purposes, also basically used in simulator, but with the obvious and the clear purpose of being able to create the outcome by combined 3D printers and screwing together prefabricated components. And the first work, which is really demonstrating almost hand-free evolution of robots that are all physically incarnated, was done in Switzerland and now Cambridge in the lab of Fumiya Ida. And those robots are very simple, and they are glued together. A couple of blocks are glued together, but they form an object that is actuated indeed. It is put into the real world, and it will show a behavior with a measurable quality. So we have a means to evaluate its fitness and use it for selection and make sure that consecutive generations are better and better. And importantly, the fabrication of a new robot is hands-free. So this thing is putting together a robot, and those 3 stacked boxes are the robot. It's not very complicated. Without sensors again, but here you see that after being born, this robot is taken out of, let's call it the production center or the birth clinic, and put in the real world. And this is the moment when fitness evaluation starts. And this is the moment when fitness evaluation finishes. And last but not least, the attempt in Amsterdam. It's also without sound. Fortunately, it is subtitled. So I hope it will be okay with you. So this was a proof of concept, and strictly speaking, it didn't even show evolution. It showed reproduction of one generation. But by iteration, it can be seen, and I do see it as a proof of concept for evolution. So the question is, can we evolve real robots now? And the answer is yes. And getting back to the basics, it only takes 2 ideas. Idea number 1 is to distinguish genotypes and phenotypes, just like in life. And the genotype is the robotic equivalent of a DNA, and it is the specification sheet. And the phenotype is the real robot existing in the real world. And the transformation between the two, which is like the 9 months for human beings or 21 days for chickens, can be done with a 3D printer. So those are the 2 ideas. And putting it all together, you get a diagram which shows the generic system architecture, which was published by a group of researchers, including indeed Andy and John from York, Ellen Winfield, and a couple of others. And the idea is that you distinguish 3 stages. Stage number 1 is the birth process, converting a genotype to a phenotype. And then the new thing is identifying a stage of infancy where the robot is not fertile, but undergoes a learning process so that it gets smarter and smarter. And after passing some examination, it becomes fertile and mature, adult, and then it can enter, the world it has to operate in. So this is still the basic diagram. And if you recall the first one about evolutionary computing on the left-hand side, the new one on the right-hand side extends it with the learning. So that's all to it somehow. After reproduction, we include a learning stage, and the fitness evaluation will take place after learning is finished. Looking at the system from another perspective. So the 2 pillars of evolution is reproduction and selection, and both can be done hands-free or both can be done with human assistance, which gives us 4 options. So the simplest system is, I call it type 1, when selection is assisted by humans, like breeders, farmers, and reproduction is also assisted, like you need human hands to put together a robot. And ultimately, you want to go to type 4 systems. And this also means that we can use evolution in 2 different modi. We can use it as an offline optimizer in the design stage of robot. And once we get a good design, we can freeze evolution and produce 10,000 of those robots and deploy them wherever we need them. Alternatively, we could use evolution in an online fashion when the robots are optimizing themselves on the job, for instance, in inaccessible or hostile environments. And that is the real evolution, because evolution is not about optimization, it's about adaptation. And evolution is somehow abused in the blue scheme and used at its maximum capacity in the green scheme. So now the next question I want to touch upon is, should we do this really? Is it a good idea? Are there no objections? And the answer is yes, there are objections, because if we have a bunch of robots reproducing and evolving out there in the wild, we could easily get runaway evolution. So thinking about that means it doesn't mean that we mustn't do it. It only means that we shouldn't do it in a certain way. So we should not use robotic equivalents of cell division or eggs or pregnancy, because these are all distributed reproduction mechanisms. Robots could be born anywhere and everywhere. But this is not needed either, actually. So even if we reject distributed self-reproduction, we can have an evolutionary process, because it does not violate the whole concept of evolution. We can say that all we want is centralized, externalized reproduction, meaning that we have some central infrastructure that is used to produce robots. And if you put it all together, then you get a new concept, which is the Evosphere Concept. And here you see the stages of the triangle of life. So the red pyramid is the fabrication center or the birth clinic where the little robots are built. They first enter the stage of infancy in the training center or nursery. And after they pass the examination, they can go and live and work in the arena. And importantly, this birth clinic is the kill switch. If we shut that down, evolution will stop because reproduction will stop. It doesn't mean that all robots will die, but evolution will not work anymore. So what is this good for? If we had this technology working, we could use it in really different applications. We could breed robots for environmental monitoring in rainforests. We could breed robots or even have them evolve down on the seafloor and mine some stuff we want to have. We could go a very small scale and nano robots in the human body, playing virus scanners literally in our bodies, or go the other edge of the scale and use them for terraforming in space exploration. Importantly, this all comes down to second order software and hardware engineering, meaning that instead of engineering a system directly, we are engineering a system, an evolutionary system, that engineers a solution for us. So this is indeed a big challenge, changing a lot. Now, getting back to the academic realm, recall this fundamental implication: environment plus body plus brain imply behavior. And to show that this can be blown up big time, I want to refer to a book that some of you may know, a beautiful book again from Rob Pfeiffer and Josh Bongard called How the Body Shapes the Way We Think, or simply How the Body Shapes the Brain. Which means that the book investigates the blue arrow or this diagram in the middle. But of course, you can invert that and then investigate how the brains shape the bodies, because with this technology, bodies become shapeable. Or you can say, we investigate how they shape each other under certain environmental conditions. So basically, all kinds of combinations and relationships can be investigated, which means a huge research program for decades for such a large community. So we don't do that all on at the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam. At the moment, we are trying to lay the groundwork, develop concepts and know-how on how to do that, and seeking some deeper understanding of how evolution works if we change the substrate. So this is our robot lab. We just moved into a new building and we have the luxury situation of a big lab, like, I don't know, 10 by 6 meters. So we can build 2 substantial arenas and run parallel experiments there. And what we do with that is we go down and execute the to-do list of a robot evolver. First, we define what phenotypes we want, that's the body types. Then we decide about what DNA or genotypic representation can represent them. And then we set up a production facility that can convert the spec sheets of a genotype into the robot phenotype. And then we do what everybody does in evolutionary something, whether it's computational robotics, define crossover and mutation operators, set targets, what is to be optimized, what kind of skills or tasks or fitness values we want to maximize, how do we do selection, and in robot evolution, as I said, we always need learning, so we need to decide about that too. And here is a list of results, which I will not discuss one by one to save time. These are on my website, so if you are really interested, you can go there and look into the papers. The main message is that there are a lot of things to do, and we are trying to do some of them. In the meanwhile, one of my main interests is to get some knowledge and insights about the evolution of intelligence. So, are there preconditions? Are there attractors? Are there invariants? And how does it happen? Does it happen in a hockey stick curve way, you know, first rapidly and then stagnating, or other way around, or linearly, or with big jumps? Now, to show you what is really happening, so this could be called as an invariant. So one of my PhD students evolved robots in simulation, had a biologist's friend, and they were looking at it together. And the biologist said, oh, I know this shape and I know this gait. This robot is moving like, and then she named an animal. And they could indeed identify a couple of robots and a couple of animals that are somehow similar, which is really interesting because it says that evolution has a kind of attractors or fixed points that you get even if you change the substrate drastically. And we also have learning methods. So what you see here is a given robot body, a fixed morphology, and all we evolve is the brain. So it's the good old-fashioned evolutionary robotic style. Why I find this interesting, because it shows that indeed very natural gaits, very natural movements do emerge, and that is somehow very interesting. Even if we are the makers of this, we get excited when we look at that. Now, on the other video, you see another robot for a completely different task. And the task was not go from A to B as quickly as possible, but rotate along your axis and look around in the world. So this particular robot did not have the camera yet, and now they do. And this is a behavior that you need to find an object in your environment, for instance, the charging station. And the newest one, also methodological invention, is that we are going from machine learning to learning machines. And we make a kind of parallel between what machine learning guys do. They always validate their new algorithm on a bunch of data sets. And you say, okay, this is my winning machine learning algorithm, and I have a credit card data set, a diabetes data set, a Netflix recommendation data set, whatever. And on all of these data sets, they try and test and compare their algorithms. Now we do the same, except instead of data sets, we are using robots, simulated or real robots, and the learning methods are compared on different body plans. And it's the same exercise then. We look at different algorithms on different body plans, and then we want to have an algorithm which is the most efficient, the most effective, and the most robust on all of these. And this is the most technical slide, and then I go to rounding up. The technical details are like this. So you see the robot in the physical world, a rendered image, and a structural diagram. And in the big picture, you see the neural network that is driving the robot, showing how many parameters do we have to optimize. So technically speaking, learning means we have to find optimal values for these parameters. I skip this because it's too complicated. And our last and maybe most exciting thing is now the learning data. So because we have learning, each robot has an inherited brain, and after finishing its work in the nursery, it will have a learned brain. And the performance difference between the two is the learning data. And what you see here is something really exciting and inspiring, because it shows that over consecutive generations, the learning data is increasing, which means that we are obtaining by evolution morphologies that are better and better learners. So this can be interpreted as an evidence of the emergence of morphological intelligence purely by evolution. Now, another slide that you are all waiting for, the Autonomous Robot Evolution Project led by Andy with 4 partner universities from Bristol, Edinburgh, and Amsterdam. This project is building the first real-world Evosphere. It was granted most likely because we had an application which is highly relevant. And one of its most important novelties is it will feature hybrid robot evolution. And this will be a completely new way of hybridization. So what you have in evolutionary robotics, sometimes people run an evolutionary population in simulation. All robots are virtual and they are all evaluated in simulation. And every now and then, one of them is converted into a physical robot and also evaluated in the world. In the R project, we do something different. We have 2 completely different populations, a virtual and a physical one, that act as one species because they have the same genetic code. That means that we can cross-fertilize them. We can have a virtual mother and a physical father and create a child. And we can use this feature also for migrating robots from the physical world to the virtual or other way around. We are simply sending the DNA in that other world, and then we use the constructor, the simulator, or the physical constructor to build that robot. And here you see a video of the R birth clinic or the R reproduction center, which shows how a robot is constructed by an arm that can handle 3D printed components and prefabricated components we call organs. So we can have wheel organs, CPU organs, camera organs, or joint organs. And if you look at these 2 videos that I just started, you could see that we do indeed have digital twins to physical robots and physical twins to virtual robots, which is a very interesting property. Anything we can build, we can simulate, and anything we can simulate, we can also build. So my guess is that in 5 years, we really will have an Evosphere. The R project will be the first one realizing this. It will be type 1 plus. A lot of things will be hands-free, but not everything. In 5 to 15 years, we could have supervised type 2 and 3 Evospheres, and in 15 plus years, the technology will be there for completely autonomous robot evolution that could operate without human oversight. And then running up, so this all sounds as practical thing, but there is also relevance for fundamental science, because evolutionary robot systems can be used as a research instrument, pretty much like a telescope for astronomers to study evolutionary processes, fundamental investigations into the emergence of life and intelligence. Which means that the whole technology is useful for three different things: engineering, it can build us better robots; science, it can help with fundamental research understanding ourselves; and it can help with outreach, so we can build a robot zoo and a robotic park instead of a Jurassic Park, and from the entrance fees we can hire more PhD students. Over the long term, so not 15 years, but maybe hundreds of years, the outcome will be a bit more unclear. So pretty much like those guys in the Middle Ages who were dreaming about flying machines, we are dreaming about self-reproducing and evolving machines. And pretty much like those guys who couldn't predict what their dream will become in 500 years, we cannot predict either what these machines will be doing in 500 years. But one thing is for sure, we will have a kind of artificial equivalent, the technosphere of the biosphere. And these will be technical artifacts, but as for me, it will be life, but not life as we know it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Gus. Fantastic talk. Well done. Little clap there. Fantastic. Okay, so I think maybe we've got about 5 minutes for questions. So I can't actually see everybody on my screen. So maybe if somebody wants to on the mic and shout, we'll try and keep some sort of order in that respect.
I'm keeping an eye on participants. If anybody raises their hands, I'll see.
Can you see everybody, Anna? Okay.
I can.
My screen's not big enough.
Okay. Okay, Susan has a question. Go ahead, Susan.
Hi, Gus. Fantastic talk as always. Many thanks. Yeah, I was just wondering, you talked at the beginning about the reality gap between simulation and real robots, and then at the end you've got this hybrid of simulations and real robots. Are you using any feedback process to improve your simulation from the way the robots are actually working?
Yes, the answer is yes, it's part of the project plan. So, and no, because we are not there yet, but definitely it is possible, and it would be a waste of resources of not doing it. The physical robots evaluations can be fed back and used to make the simulator more realistic.
Okay, if nobody has a question, might I ask a question, Andy?
You may, Anna, yes.
Okay, but Gus, if I understood right, you have the various sites involved in your project, and they all have a cradle for this robot. Are you able to reproduce the results that you have in one site in the other, or is that not the idea? And if not, why is that? Is it the dreaded reality gap? Is because you're using different simulators? What goes on in that case?
What are the two sides that you are referring to? The physical incarnation versus the virtual world, or two virtual worlds or two physical worlds?
Two physical worlds. I know that it has one here in York, and
yes.
One in Amsterdam.
Yes.
Perhaps there is one in Bristol as well.
No, they're just in York and Bristol, Anna. So there are only two.
Yes.
Okay.
Indeed. Yes. So we don't have the resources. Yeah. It's an intriguing question. We didn't do it. Okay. So there is no empirically funded answer to that. An educated guess would be they will be different. I don't know, Bristol is maybe the lab is warmer, or the materials are different, or anything, little things can make a big difference. So my guess is that if you run a physical evolutionary process using the same technological setup, but different in York and in Bristol, after a couple of generations, they will diverge, if for nothing else, because selection and reproduction have stochastic elements. So it will be not always the same two robots selected for reproduction.
Okay, but if you're using the simulation, it is just the stochastic. Are you using the same simulation setup in both sites as well?
That's the idea indeed. So yeah, the simulation will be identical. In computer simulations, it's much easier to guarantee that this is the same thing.
Okay, right. Okay, thank you.
But again, so we are not there yet. So COVID slowed us up with almost a year. So this is a bit frustrating. Normally, we would be able to answer your question now based on real work, but now it's still just guesses.
I'll ask again in a little while.
I think it's mitigated somewhat, Anna, because the organs are pre-made. So and the electronics is the same. Effectively, the boards are pre-made. So it's actually, and the brain, importantly, is the same. So that the thing that really is evolved is the skeleton and where the organs go. So between two sites with the same body plan, they will be pretty similar, actually, I think.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you both.
Maybe we should stop there and allow Kennedy time for his. So Gus, can I thank you once again for coming along to York today. I hope the trip wasn't too arduous for you. And it's always lovely to hear you talk. So you're very welcome to stay on to the end, or if you need to rush off to do other stuff, then I understand that's.
I have another meeting coming up in 15 minutes, but I would like to see the beginning if you don't mind.
Okay. I will see you in about 3 weeks. So
okay, thank you for inviting me.
You're very welcome. Okay, everybody. So the second talk, shorter talk this afternoon, is from Kennedy, who's a PhD student in the Department of Environment and Geography. What year PhD student are you, Kennedy?
My third year.
Okay, you're in your third year. Okay, so you're in the write-up year, maybe at some time soon. And I think Kennedy's talk is going to be looking at autonomous underwater vehicles for looking at rivers and maybe oceans. So let me pass it across to you, Kennedy, because you don't have so long. So I'll stop talking.
Okay, thank you all, and thank you for inviting me for this seminar. I think it's now time to dive into the application of robots. So I think there's been a good introduction about robots. So I'll now showcase how robots can be applied in management and conservation of marine environments. So to start us off, Mesophotic coral ecosystem, which refer to ecosystem between 30 to 150 meters deep in marine environments, are some of the under-researched ecosystem in the Western Indian Ocean. And this is the Western Indian Ocean area. And based on this study by Vrije, it's clear that the number of studies done in the Western Indian Ocean are a few. And I think most of them there are few, about 6 which have been done, but not within the Western Indian Ocean. So as such, there is a knowledge gap about the Mesophotic coral ecosystem in this area. And part of the reason about this is because there are challenges around the high ship-based costs and also logistical and capacity challenges. This makes it impossible to really know exactly the value of this Mesophotic coral ecosystem in the region. But in the recent years, there's been evolution in technology, and unmanned vehicles have really become essential in overcoming these challenges. The autonomous underwater vehicles such as this Gavia has the ability and utilities of doing great surveys by surveying deep environments up to 500 meters. They also have the ability to provide high resolution data on seabed properties. Above all, also they collect a number of data, including those on backscatter or bathymetry, and also take photographs that would give evidence of benthic community. So the question here is, why should we care about Mesophotic coral ecosystem? Studies around the study area in the Western Indian Ocean, particularly in Unguja and Pemba in Tanzania, have found that there's evidence of depth refuge effect based on where fishermen get their fish. So as such, there's a high potential of this Mesophotic coral ecosystem, really providing refuge against high temperature as well as high fishing pressure. But at this point, their conservation potential is still unclear. The autonomous underwater vehicle is a good way of overcoming these challenges, particularly this one, the Gavia, because it's a low logistic modular vehicle in the sense that it can be fitted in with different modules. Each module can have its own use in surveying a particular area. So in case you're interested in backscatter, you can attach those modules that are of interest to you. And because of that also, you can interchange the modules, and in case the battery goes off, then you can also bring in a new battery. And that gives it a very important and relevant thing in terms of surveying the reefs. So in this case, we did a study in the Western Indian Ocean in Tanzania, so which is in eastern part of Africa. And we deployed the AUV in an island called Pemba. It's separated from the mainland Tanzania by a channel, Pemba Channel, which is about 800 meters at the deepest part and averages about 300 meters. So we deployed the AUV in order to survey different depths from around 5 meters to around 150 meters to really get some baseline information about the reefs in this area. So the AUV was deployed in different manner. One was deployed for seafloor mapping, where the AUV was flying at 10 meters above the seafloor. And second was for detailed seabed mapping or photography, where the AUV was flying 2 meters above the seafloor. And lastly was for an oceanographic survey, where the AUV would fly at variable depths, starting from 5 to 150 meters. So in essence, by flying the AUV in these different depths, you're able to get different sets of data that is able to give you a good baseline data about the shallow and mesophotic coral ecosystem in the area. So we collected various data. One was bathymetry, highlighting the depth, backscatter giving an indication about the sediment type in the area, and photography giving evidence about the habitat and the benthic community in the area. So that brings me to how or the uses of AUV or robotics in conservation and management. One, they provide this high resolution data on seafloor properties. For instance, with this layer here, you're able to see how the seafloor looks like. For instance, there's this complex feature that one is able to come and view. So in this case, these are walls, submarine walls, which were found to be really critical by holding a high biodiversity of communities. So in essence, they provide this high resolution data, which can be essential for management and conservation planning of an area. So they also help highlight where priority areas for conservation would be. For instance, in this case, we noticed that where there were these submarine walls is where you found high biodiversity of communities or benthic communities. So in essence, the AUV are essential for bringing out the important areas that need conservation. The other thing is that they provide this photographic evidence of the substrata and habitats. One thing that was clear that we came across was these depressions, which are pockmarks that were widely distributed in this area. And the source of these pockmarks can either be fluid escape or biorational or even gas. So upon doing more pictures, we came to a conclusion that these pockmarks are actually of fluid escape rather than bioerosional or being made by animals. Also, there were other photographs of different benthic communities, like different fishes, corals, sponges, algae, at different depths. Like these fish here were found at depths around 114 meters. And you can see that it's a clear photo and gives you that evidence that there exists, there's a high potential of these reefs providing this refuge for fish in this area. The other use that AUV can do is to provide the various sets of data set, which are also useful for modeling. Since resources are limited, you would want to get high quality data that which you can model and identify priority areas for conservation. So through modeling of hard substrata as well as corals, we were able to determine the depth at which the Mesophotic coral ecosystems start, or their boundary. And that showcased that their boundary is around 30 to 40 meters. And therefore, other areas that are with 30 to 40, that are other areas, so you are able to identify areas that would be potential for conservation. So the application of AUVs for management and conservation is that, one, they have a great potential to map photic and mesophotic coral ecosystems, such as those in Pemba Channel. Two, they can also provide this high resolution data that is important in identifying priority areas for conservation. And also, they provide two functions. One is help in collecting baseline data for areas that are not easily accessible or where staff are limited. And because of their low logistic and modular nature, they make them very useful for this routine monitoring of habitats and benthic communities. So in terms of policy recommendations from this, is that there's need to, first of all, build awareness of the mesophotic coral ecosystem in this area, and also do more stakeholder engagement so that this realization of mesophotic depths are important for various reasons. And also invest, the management agency in this area need to invest in this low-cost marine robotics, as well as the need to do amendments of conservation policy to ensure that mesophotic coral ecosystem are acknowledged or recognized in these policies. And since we found the pockmarks widely distributed in the area, there's actually need to do further studies on them. And lastly, do this detailed monitoring across mesophotic depth and assess the threat that they are facing. So I'd like to acknowledge various people who played a part in this research, and thank you for listening. In any case, you want to get more information about this study, you can visit this place. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Kennedy. Very interesting talk. Very exciting application, very much worthwhile. Our host popped out. I will be trying coordinating any questions. I can see the participants. Does anybody would anybody like to ask Kennedy a question?
I could ask one.
Please, Leandro.
Mainly, I would like to know about the level of autonomy and the amount of communications between operator and the autonomous underwater vehicle. How much can they do on their own, and how much do they require intervention?
So they are left to survey for around 1 hour or 2 hours by themselves. But in the meantime, we always maintain constant communication with them through having a pinger on a boat and dropping it inside and then doing some radio communication with the vehicle, because in essence, you don't want to lose them, and because they're costly also, so you don't want to lose them. And with that, the constant communication by sending SMS to the vehicle and back, you're able to locate where it is. So there's a high level of autonomy because they would follow some mission, predetermined mission lines until from the start to end. But in any case, there is any urgency of bringing it back, you can cancel the mission to bring the vehicle back to where you want.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Rob has his hand up. Rob, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wondered, because RAS group and intercommunication stuff, I've wondered if you've had much communication with Mark Post over in electronics, because he's doing something called RoboFish. I don't know if you have or not. They're kind of coming towards the end of that and doing some testing soon, but they're basically trying to design underwater like UAVs basically. And they're doing a modular thing with parts that move rather than a single like torpedo, I guess you could call it. But I just wanted to flag that up. I think they're having a meeting right now, amusingly, about it, which is why they might not be here. But yeah, I just wondered if you, I just think you should drop them a message if you haven't heard much about it.
Yeah, no, I haven't had interaction with him, but it's something that I can follow up.
Right, go ahead.
Can I just say, so it's Bryce Stewart here. I'm one of Kennedy's supervisors. So Mark actually got in touch with me about a week ago to talk about this. So we have made contact, but I haven't even had a chance to tell Kennedy about it yet. But yeah, we're going to try and build that collaboration. So thanks.
Okay. See this? Perhaps one last question before we tell people that we thank them and Kennedy again. See this? Would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, just a relatively minor one, to be honest. The ones that you showed on the slides were rather big. I was wondering if there's any, if there are any smaller models of AUVs, particularly for environments with more obstructions, like mangroves, for example, is what I was thinking. Or are they all currently rather large?
So yeah, so part of this project that I was working in was to improve capacity for surveying reefs in the under-researched area of Western Indian Ocean. So we had one small robot which came for demonstration. It's called EcoSub. So it's able to do various things like collection of temperature, depth, salinity, the basic things, but not do the mapping that the AUV that I've shown did. So there are smaller ones, and of course, the industry is looking into investing into small robots that are less costly and easily applicable to different places.
So there is a lot more room for development on that aspect then, on that front at least.
Pardon?
So there is a lot more development on that front, I assume then?
Yeah, yes.
A lot more room for development, sorry.
Yeah, you can search on EcoSub, you will see them. They're just small, about this size.
I'm just looking that up right now. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We're now over 4 o'clock. I'd like to thank everybody for attending the YorRobots seminar. Our next seminar will happen in the autumn, so keep an eye on the RAS group, and we will announce there are a host of very interesting speakers coming up. I would like to thank Kennedy once again, and if Kennedy, would you be all right to stay on the line, and people that want to ask you more questions, they can? Is that all right? Or do you have? Yeah. So everybody, join me just to thank you, Kennedy. Very interesting application, very nice talk. And I hope to see you all for the next seminar in the autumn and perhaps before. Thank you.
Thank you.